Today we are going to be replacing the spark plugs on this 2016 Volkswagen Jetta, and it has the 1.8 liter TSI engine. And now this particular Volkswagen is approximately at 115,000 kilometers, and the service interval for spark plugs replacement is at 96,000 kilometers. And so today we are going to be replacing them. Welcome back to the Moose Mobile Auto Repair channel. And so let's get started on replacing the spark plugs. So the first thing you want to do is to remove the engine cover. So lift up each tab one at a time, and then the cover comes out. So now you need to remove the ignition coil nuts. They are 10 millimeters each. You want to remove the ground connections from the studs, and then you will have another 10 millimeter nut for each one. The stud comes out with the nut at the same time. I don't know if that's because the nut is seized on that one. Okay, so they come out as one piece like this. So now you would have to move the tab here. You would have to lift up on the tab to push the connector out. So these tabs, they lift up, and you'll be able to hear a click on each one. You can use your thumb or flathead screwdriver to lift up carefully on the tab. You should be able to pull the connectors out. You probably best to pull them out all at the same time. Try to be as careful as possible to get this out of the way. So once the harness is loose here, you'll be able to pull it out. You can push back on the tab here to get off of the hose, so you can have some more room. So now I just need to wiggle the ignition coil for each one to pull each one out. I just wanted to mention that you 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 don't want to remove spark plugs on a hot engine. You would want to wait for the aluminum head in the block to cool down. If you just recently driven the car, probably wait a couple hours or so until the engine has cooled down, and then remove the spark plugs then. Because if you remove the spark plugs when the engine is hot, you could damage the threads inside the head. So now I want to remove the spark plug. I'm using a 5/8 spark plug socket extension and a 3/8 ratchet. I'm going to loosen all of them up first. These are the old spark plugs. Has the Volkswagen part number. So here are all four of the spark plugs. It just seems to me is very normal wear and tear. You can see the insulator on the ceramic on the white part is worn out, and the electrode tip is also quite worn out. So we are going to be using the original Volkswagen spark plugs. I got these from the dealership, and these are quite expensive. At the time of this video, I paid roughly my cost $30 per spark plug, $30 Canadian. So now I'm just going to install this onto the tool here. Make sure that the washer sits at the very bottom. You don't want this cockeyed or crooked. You want to make sure the washer is flat so that when you install the spark plug, it seats in properly so that the combustion gases do not pass by the washer here. This develops a seal inside the head. So you want to make sure that this washer is perfectly flat before you install these in the engine. So what I like to do is I like to use a small tab or dab of anti-seize here on the threads. I like to put a little bit of anti-seize on the threads here You don't want to put too much, so this would prevent the spark plugs from seizing up in the future. Now, the manufacturer states that there is a coating on the metal, but that's not enough anymore, because I've still seen some vehicles where they pass the recommended interval, and they seized up in the head. So you want to make sure you put some anti-seize in here so that you don't run into problems. So we are going to install the first spark plug now. Want to thread these in by hand, and then use a ratchet to snug up spark plugs, and then we are going to do a final torquing on these. Just take note about the rubber piece that's inside the tool. Make sure that the rubber piece does not get caught onto the spark plugs. Repeat the same procedure for the rest of the spark plugs. I've seen some guys, they drop the spark plug inside. You don't want to do that, because that's going to disturb the gap on the spark plugs. Now, typically you are supposed to check the gap before you install these plugs. It's not advisable to adjust the gaps on modern day spark plugs, because sometimes that could cause problems. If you need to adjust the gap on modern day spark plugs, it's probably best to get a new one that has been already preset by the manufacturer. You shouldn't need to adjust the gap at any point in time. Now, to be on the safe side, you can use a gap checker like this, and take the new plug and have a look at how much the gap is, and compare that to the factory specs. This one I'm getting roughly about I think 25 thousandths of an inch, 0.025 of an inch. So you can compare that to the factory specs, and make sure it's is roughly around that much. Now, as the spark plug ages with time, the gap will naturally increase. So over time, when the gap increases, but by that time you would have to replace the plugs anyways. So let's continue on installing the second plug now. Typically, I like to go all the way by hand, just to be on the safe side, because I don't want to run into any problems here. In case if you guys are wondering on what the part number is for the current part number, it's right here, 06K 90560 NGK R1. So the torque spec for these spark plugs are 22 foot-pounds. That's quite a bit on today's engines, but that's what the specification calls for. So I set it to 22. Oh, good. Again, make sure that the rubber piece is not caught inside there, because if it is, you will need to take it out and get it out somehow. So now we are going to reinstall the ignition coils. What I like to do is I like to use a little bit of electric grease. I'm using the super lube grease, which is good for they call this is used for a dielectric compound. So anyhow, I'm going to put some on the boot here, a tiny amount, and some on the electrical connection here, a connector. And we are going to do the same for all of them, so it doesn't seize up in there. It's probably a good idea to have a visual inspection in the holes. Make sure you didn't drop anything here. A piece of my glove was on the side here. It didn't fall inside the hole, so you got to be careful. We're going to install that. I'm going to do the same for all coils. Try not to put an excessive amount of this grease, because it's not good if you put too much. Just a small dab here and there. So we are going to just to line up the connectors for now. You know what? Probably going, yeah, I'm just gonna install the electrical connectors now, and then we're gonna install the bolts last. Make sure you hear an affirmative click. Make sure it's in properly. Sometimes you have to be careful. You may not be able to hear the click, so you need to push it in and lock in the tabs here for each one. We're just going to bolt them on, and then we're going to double check the connectors again. So I like to put a little bit of dielectric grease on the bolts too, on each one here. I want to thread each one in by hand. Now it doesn't really matter if you want to install the bolts first or the connectors first. You can do it however way you want it. Just make sure everything is in. Now if you're not confident, you can always use a 10 mil screwdriver style and do it by hand, and that should be enough. However way you want to do the job, it doesn't really matter as long as the procedure is correct. Your style of how you do the job does not matter. As long as you follow the correct procedures and tightening sequences, you should be fine. There isn't always a single or one correct answer. There's always uh, different ways you can do things. So we are going to tighten the bolts. Now we're going to verify the connectors now. Make sure they are in properly and lock them in. So make sure all of the ignition coils are locked into place by trying to pull and to tug on it. Make sure it doesn't come loose. There's this one here, it's still loose. So we are going to try to lock it in place. Sometimes the tab, they don't work properly, so we need to push it in, make sure it locks in so it doesn't come loose. So sometimes you may have to manually push these tabs in to lock it into place, or if it's already in the locked position and you put this in, you have to take it back out and unlock it. And if you're not able to lock these after, then just try to get it in the best you can. And I don't think uh, you should be too worried about it because there's not much that you can do. Just make sure it's secured in and doesn't back out. So now we're just going to reinstall the ground connections back. Put a little dab of dielectric grease. Reinstall the nuts. And you also want to reinstall the clip here to hold the hose. There we go. And you can start to tighten the nuts. The torque spec for these nuts are not very tight, just snug, and that's it. Do not over tighten these. After that, you're all good to go. You just need to reinstall the cover and start the engine up and and see how it sounds. So make sure you verified all of the connections are good. Reinstall the cover. So the car is running very well now, and she sounds very good. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day and take care.